Welcome, everyone. We are a 40-minute session. And so we're asking that we'll have a 5-10 minute question period at the end. And we just have a series of questions that we'll throw out and ruminate over. And we ask you, all of the panelists, invite you to come and talk informally after the session as well. So to begin with, I'm going to ask Cooper Lane to introduce himself.
Sure, no problem. Like I said, I think that we've got a rolling start on this panel, so that's good. I'll tell you who I am now. So Cooper Lane, Vice President of Sales with Brave Control Solutions. I started working with Brave formally about 3 years ago, but I actually brought their first opportunity in offsite construction to them about 7 years ago. So I think that some of you may be familiar with Z Modular. So Z Modular is a modular manufacturer that's located, they have a location here actually two. They did have two in the Toronto area, one in the Toronto area now, Austin, Texas, and Phoenix. We were brought a steel chassis from them, asked to create an automated weld cell to build that steel chassis. This was our first opportunity 7 years ago. Here we are now, back in 2021, our eyes were open to the opportunity to modernizing this industry. So we decided to stick around. 2-3 years later, it is primarily what we do. We come from automotive. So back in 2008, we were started as a controls company in automotive. We are now happy to call ourselves an automation company performing primarily in offsite construction. We have a little bit of automotive customer base still, legacy customer base, but about 90% of our customer base is now in offsite construction. We build automation, it's a bespoke design, build, install, commission, support automation systems that use materials like structural steel, where we got our start, like gauge steel, dimensional wood, SIP panel, composite materials. We operate out of Windsor, Ontario, so not too far down the road from here, about a 3.5 hour drive. That's how fast you're going and how the traffic is. But out of Windsor, we're doing work now throughout North America, and then also over in Saudi Arabia and some in Europe as well. The stuff that we're doing in Saudi Arabia has a lot to do with the NEOM projects, giga projects that are going on in that region, there's a whole new challenge in that region as to why they need automation as opposed to what we're hearing here. We are addressing issues like the labor crisis, the sustainability, the scrap rates, the cost. All those kinds of things are things that automation, we know, can help solve that problem. So that's why Brave stuck around, and it's why we're playing in this space now.
Thanks. Greg.
My name is Greg Godbout. I'm the principal and founder of Soukup America. We're a company that we started into the offsite construction world in 2016 with the first project that we got involved with was the Katera project down in Phoenix, Arizona. That opened our eyes to the opportunity for the offsite construction market. Our main world prior to that was in the complex joinery world, building machinery for the window and door market. That was our first entry into it. And then through this new opportunity in the marketplace, we became very heavily involved in the offsite construction. Essentially what we are, we're heavy machinery manufactured component tables. So we are building specialized cutoff saws, framing systems, wing systems, storage lines for MEPs, different components like that. We're being pulled more and more from the last 4 years into how do we update with automation into our existing systems or into the new systems that we're involved with. We started out with very more manual kind of tables, but now we're adding automation where required, and the automation can be as simplistic as CNC nailing bridges and routing systems, or in the case of Brave and other companies like that, we're adding robotic components into that. So the world is moving very quickly. We're adapting as we go, and for us, our main office is Vancouver, Canada, although we do have a sub-office in Colorado. We have staff in Arizona. We also have some staff in France, and we have a main manufacturing Czech Republic and subcomponent manufacturing here in North America.
Thanks, Greg. My name is Stephen Fye. I'm a professor at the Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism at Carleton University. And I run a research center called the Carleton Immersive Media Studio. And we work in a broad range of research projects that try to bring digital technologies to the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. In particular, we've worked in a lot of heritage projects. We've been heavily involved in the rehabilitation of the Parliament buildings in Ottawa, both at a digital capture level, reality capture level, building information modeling in the context of heritage conservation, which when we started doing that, we were talking about getting pushback. Several people stood up and told us we were crazy 10 years ago. But we've also worked in AR, VR, and also in offsite fabrication using robots. And our applications are quite different than my colleagues. We've been working not exclusively, but extensively with the Dominion sculptor, which is an individual employed by the Canadian government. If you're not a Canadian, you're probably thinking that sounds insane, but that's Canada. And we've been working with him to develop workflows to use a robot essentially as his apprentice. So we have numerous projects where he will model something, we'll scan it or capture it using photogrammetry, and then we'll rough it out using the mill, using the robot, and then he'll finish it by hand. And it facilitates changes in scale for bespoke pieces, etc. So my experience is quite different than my colleagues, but we have had a preliminary conversation, and I think we have a lot to offer to this subject. So with that, I'm going to kick it off with the first question, and again, this will be a conversation essentially, and the questions are really just to kind of take us along, but who knows where we'll wind up. And I'm going to put this question first to Greg. Why is now the time for offsite construction with robotics? And again, we had a bit of talk about this, that the idea of prefabrication and offsite construction is not a new idea.
Yeah, Coop and I were talking about this earlier. So let me qualify what our thoughts are on robotics. Because robotics and automation are kind of a loose term. So when we look at robotics, we look at the concept is more around automation. So what is automation? Automation is the controlled mechanization of the process. So why is the timing right now? Well, first of all, the demand is there. The demand is there for the housing sector, for the commercial building sector. The staffing levels are at a disastrously low period. I mean, we don't have the workers there to be able to facilitate the needs. We need to be able to standardize as much as possible, and automation fits itself perfect for that. But there are challenges that we need to understand with the concepts of automation and what type of automation fits into the right application. But it is definitely on the curve that it must be integrated into the systems. So.
Thanks. Yeah. Do you want to add to it?
Yeah, so I was just going to say what he said. But no, to expand on that, the reasons that, and we've heard about it since the keynote speaker, the issues that we have in this industry. And now when they speak more towards the construction industry. Well, I also see, so I guess the first step, and we were talking about it before the panel actually started, the first step we feel at Brave, and I think Soukup probably agrees, is to go offsite, is to use this new method. Now, offsite construction, like you said, like you've alluded to, Steve, it's not new. They tried it, they tried to automate offsite construction a long time ago. It didn't work. It didn't work because it wasn't a repeat piece, and the consumer wasn't about to buy cookie cutting. Offsite construction has been around for years and years, but it's grossly underutilized. So in North America, we have all these issues that everyone's heard already: the labor shortage, the housing crisis, this giant gap between what we need and what we can actually build. And in North America, we utilize offsite construction. It's like 6%. When Brave started in this industry, it was hovering around 3%. So we've doubled, but we're still at 6%. There's other regions in the world. So you talk about Nordic countries. Nordic countries are actually around 50, 60%. I've heard Japan as high as 70% is utilized as offsite construction. So now if we go to that, now we're utilizing a new, we feel, better method if we actually modernize it, make it a manufacturing facility like the industries that we come from automotive and aerospace. I use an anecdote from our region, everyone's facing the same problems: the housing crisis, the shortage of doors that we need throughout. Let's say, just let's keep it to U.S. and Canada. So in our region, Windsor, fairly recently, the mayor decided to hold a symposium to talk about this shortage and how we're going to address it. I wasn't there. We weren't invited. A little butthurt about that. I think that we should be there. But so who was there? You look at who was there. You look at the list of people. It's all conventional builders. And the headline on the article that was reporting on the symposium about the housing crisis was, "It's impossible." The conventional builders who were sitting there listening to our mayor say, we need 15,000 houses, 15,000 more houses per year. And the conventional builders are saying, it's impossible. And he's not wrong, because he's just going to employ his conventional building methods that have already put us in this situation. So let's look at what are the alternatives. Let's explore offsite construction. And we also, so now there's the case for offsite construction. Now, offsite construction, this is a whole rabbit hole, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Offsite construction now, where you go to them and say, okay, well, you guys are the next best method. Are you guys cheaper? They're not. Offsite construction is currently not a cheaper alternative to on-site construction, which again, to us, coming from a manufacturing world, is completely unacceptable. We think that making the decision to go offsite could be a lot easier if we make them cheaper, and making them cheaper with methods like what Greg and I have, it's very easy to accomplish. We see what we're doing in automotive. We're chasing fractions of a percent to improve margins and productivity in automotive. I'm not the guy that sits here and say that the automotive ideas, you cannot duplicate what automotive does in construction. We've learned a lot of very hard lessons trying to employ automotive ideas. There's processes and manufacturing methodology that works very well in offsite construction, but the flexibility that you need in automation is something that we can deploy, we can commission in offsite construction facilities. Once we make it cheaper, we're driving productivity in these offsite manufacturers that have been around already. We can get them to 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 times productivity factor. Now we're talking about real improvement. We're talking about a new method to actually address this gap that just continues to grow bigger, because Windsor's not unlike Toronto, it's not unlike Vancouver. The conventional builders are sitting there saying, we can't do that. We've already put ourselves in this hole. And unless you give us some other means to produce, or more human bodies, which we don't have, it was already, quoted upstairs, but the one note I have here is, so a framer in Ontario, average age is 50 to 55, and they have to retire by about the time they're 60. Doesn't work. We need to find a better way to make this stuff. And so why is it the time for offsite construction? Well, I explained that. Now we need to modernize it. Let's get caught up. Here's the last point, and that is, like, again, I talk about what automotive looks like. We don't need cars. We can get around without cars. We prove that especially in metro areas like this. But you look at how much time, money, and resources is actually poured into automating, modernizing, bringing that, to that extra 0.5% more efficiency in automotive. And in construction, it's an afterthought. You need a house. Let's start to modernize and put robots on those floors to actually bring it into Industry 4.0.
I mean, you mentioned that we've looked at the automotive industry, and Karen and Timberlake, their famous book. Here I am going off like a professor.
Yeah.
Advocating that the construction industry start to look to automotives and aerospace as kind of as a model to move forward. This is about 15, 20 years ago. And they've actually gone ahead and developed software products, and as an architecture firm. So I'm just wondering, can you be maybe more specific about what lessons were learned from the automotive aerospace industry that don't work, and how we can sort of turn that around? How our industry can really lead to some innovation in automation.
I'll actually start as part of one of my sales presentations. I have a picture of a slaughterhouse, because it's where Henry Ford got his idea for an assembly line. He didn't duplicate the assembly line from a slaughterhouse. He used the idea from that, employed it in automotive, and here we are now. This is where that's how the assembly line was born. So, and like you said, we've seen it firsthand. We went into our first engagements as the automotive guys about to employ or deploy automation, a lot like what we see on automotive floors. We found out real quick that the flexibility that you need in this industry, because as you're building, as we were building this first piece of automation for this company, they had design changes that were moving building columns. That's pretty standard. You say that to a construction guy, yeah, that happens. It's like, well, I'm building a machine to make that part right now. You can't do that in typical automation. You build the machine, you finish your design of your product, you build the machine to make that product, you make that product for its life cycle, and then literally they throw it in the garbage and they start again because their ROI was realized 3 years ago. There's a lot of differences in this industry. We don't have that volume. Your ROI comes about 3 or 4 years from now, but you need the flexibility. So when those building columns are moved, you can actually change that machine and it doesn't become obsolete, or you have to invest more money in it. So the flexibility is needed. The aspects that come from automotive that you can definitely use, 5S, quality systems, those types of things, are all things that when we were delivering our first pieces of machinery, we assumed that these people knew what that meant. So until like we have our first piece of machine on the floor and they're using HSS steel. The HSS steel is coming into our machine, and so our machine has this process. The robot puts it in the fixture, the machine squeezes it, and then the robots come along and weld it. Or our machine's squeezing and it's faulting out. We can't figure out why is the machine faulting out. And we realize that the floor joists are all 1/4 inch too long. So we go and we ask the saw operator, did you check your work? He's like, yeah, I measured it with a measuring tape, which is already out by a 16th anyways. We're putting it in automation. Where's your DD&T? We asked the QA manager, where's your DD&T? Your dimensioning tolerance? And he didn't know what that meant. So we actually now have to create it's like those quality systems that automotive for us, it's second nature. It's where, I was literally born onto a manufacturing floor. I grew up in a stamping operation. It's all an afterthought for us, but we have to bring these people along to actually, like I say, make them a manufacturing facility. I don't think it's a coincidence that they're still calling them warehouses. When you're making something, it's called a factory.
Yeah.
So.
Great thoughts on that.
Well, I agree. It's the automotive industry has been was focused in on the design component, and therefore after the design component was the data that was then driven from the design component. This industry, the construction industry, has had it very easy to be able to just build as they wish to build, right? So using tape measures, using very rudimentary ways in which to work, not really having to any, let's say, detailed codes that they need to work with.
Yeah.
And so if you want to bring the technology over from the automotive industry and put it in the wood industry, the first problem you're going to have is that there has not been the respect of the design component and to respect the data that's going to get from the design component. Because if you don't build off of that basic model, whatever you want to bring over from the automotive industries, first of all, is going to have some failures there. Then when you start to look at, okay, what is the raw material? And when you look at the wood industry in particular, the raw material is not that forgiving to the automation, let's say when it comes to the robotic world, because a robot loves to go and grab a repeated product that is the same size all the time. But in the wood industry, we have wood that is not consistently the same. So it's going to come over, it's going to want to grab something, it's going to want to move something, and that piece of wood could be different, repeatedly in the cutting process, right? So you can't just say, okay, automotive, therefore I've got this automation component, I'm just going to plug it into the wood industry or going to put construction industry, therefore it's going to work. The challenges of this industry need to be thought about first. And that really comes down, in our opinion, to go to the design component first, and let's start to work on the design side. So that's why this conference is really refreshing to see the amount of effort put into the design side, because design is everything. For us to be able to build properly, we need to have the designs worked out. And then from those designs are the data that be able to run the equipment properly. Yeah. But if we don't put the effort in on the design side, we're going to have a challenge.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So I was reading some information on that this morning, just kind of prepare for this panel, and that was the one comment that was made. The lack of adoption of automation to date in this industry is actually due to the lack of the reluctance to embrace design discipline, and we see that a lot. Like once you have a machine from us, you need to design within a certain set of parameters, and that's a hard sell. With architects and designers that are used to, it's more of an art to them, right? There's a lot of science obviously too, but the artistic side of it, to say no, you can't do this because your robots aren't going to make it this way. So it's helping them understand your machine needs you to design within this window. We'll give you some, some artistic freedom, but if you go outside of that window, you're not going to you're not going to hit your ROI. So you're going to have to answer to someone that made a decision to buy a multi-million-dollar machine, and you can't make half of it in that machine. So you make half of it in the machine, you have to take it out and remediate it outside that machine, and then your ROI is shot.
Yeah. That's a flaw in design education.
So actually we're working with school, and actually, as you know, we speak with you guys, and I'll be speaking at Carleton too. But a question was put to me from a local college, St. Clair College, asked me, is like, what if we made it a requirement to have a robotics class as part of your architectural diploma or degree, whatever it is? I said, absolutely. I mean, it's not necessarily something that, so like, yeah, that's awesome, I need that right now, but it's coming.
Yeah.
To have that kind of knowledge coming out of school would be very valuable.
Definitely. I mean, in the education industry, I'm always faced with, people who say, look, we've done it this way for, 30 years, 50 years. I have my clipboard. I have my, I have a PDF now. How have you approached that kind of resistance within the industry?
From myself?
Yeah.
I'll let you go ahead.
Well, it's let's say it's a common problem. It's a problem where, again, like you said earlier, that the builders that are there now, they're quite full with workload, and they may not want to adopt new ways or look at new challenges because they don't necessarily have the time. They don't really see that the invested dollar is really going to bring them that much more benefit. So it's not a hard sell, but it's a very much a laborious sell. You have to really try and take them through the benefits, and they need to have a crew that's with them in their team to be able to say to, let's say, the upper management or the people who are actually truly making the decisions, that this is the direction for us for the future. We need to be able to do that for many of the reasons that Coop is laid out. So there is a lot of reluctance to move forward. There's a lot of they don't really see how it pencils out financially. Then you have to kind of break out all the different components and give them a path that gives them some let's say, logical sense to be able to move forward. So it's very time consuming for companies such as ours.
Yeah.
We have to not only just give them a quote or design pieces of equipment, we have to take them through the whole process, which is really, what are you going to be building? How are you want to build that? What is your marketplace? What is the different ways in which to do it? How can we protect you properly for the future? How can we future-proof this? What can we do? There's quite a bit of work to take people through this process, and some will stay with you because they can see the long-term direction. Other ones will say, you know what, this is just too complex for me. I'm going to stay out of it, and therefore, we're not going to really engage. So that's a hindrance for the marketplace. It slows down the process. But it's at the early stages of an industry. This is a transformative time for this industry, for the construction side. So there needs to be people like ourselves who are really trying to push the industry and open their minds to do this, because unless the industry transforms, it's going to constantly have this challenge. So it's a very long process to get to where we have to go.
Yeah. And that resistance, our approach to it has changed over the years. Like I said, it's been since about 2017, our first opportunity, 2021, we decided to make this push into the industry, and now here we are, dedicated to the industry, very passionate about it. And I would say 2 years ago, when we were building our sales funnel, I would take the time to try to convince that person. There's enough people out there right now that, I'm going to state my case. I'm going to show them all of these. I have a sheet of those stats that you've already heard today, the 1.5% decrease in productivity, the shortage in labor, all of those things. Is like, okay, well, if you don't want to do it our way, well, how is it working for you right now? And nobody can say that it's working.
No,
it's not working. We're not addressing the issues that are just continue to, they're becoming bigger and bigger day by day. But I guess the point is that there's enough people out there right now. There's a lot of forward thinking people. There's a lot of startups. Like Grace said, we're getting contacted by people there's no resistance whatsoever. It's more of a challenge just to help them understand they're entering the industry for the first time, calling us saying, hey, I want to get into offsite construction. Well, what do you do right now? Well, I come over from investment. I see that there's an opportunity here, and you ask them, well, what's your product? Not sure yet. I was hoping you'd tell me. Should I do wood or steel? I'm like, oh, here we go. This is going to be a long one.
Yes.
But then the resistors too. I'm more comfortable saying, you know what? This is what we do. This is why I think you should be automating and modernizing. These guys are doing it right now. I don't have to say these guys are doing it right now, but they're going to see that more and more people are going to do it, and they're just going to be a late adopter. They'll be chasing.
So if someone were coming into the industry now, wanted to come into the industry, what would be some do's and don'ts?
Well, the do's on my side would definitely be spend your time on the design side.
Yep.
Yeah, spend the time going deep into your product. Whether it's the design of the standardization of the product, or what platform should you build off of, what is your marketplace, how can you build something smarter, wiser, and then from that point, what data can you pull from that to be able to really truly work the numbers to be able to manage it. The don'ts are for sure is don't just follow the money, right? Because the money it's because it's a new and exciting industry. The money now in the last 3 or 4 years, truly the big money is actually getting pushed into the marketplace. So the money side is actually the easiest. Just like you, we get calls weekly. So I have X amount of capital. I just got this building. I want to build something.
Yeah.
It's just completely backwards. Like they have a building. Now we have to build around the building. Well, what do you want to build? Well, we don't really know. Well, could we get some drawings? We don't have those yet. Right. But yet they have the money. The money's in place. Right. So they're following the money first, or they'll come to us and say, I'm working on a proposal because I know I can build a lot of product, and therefore I can raise this capital to do this. But what's the product? So the product is not really thought out yet. So it's actually for us, it's actually a little fearful, because if you spend time,
You can waste a lot of money.
Waste a lot of money and time and effort with the people who are chasing the money rather than chasing the design.
Yeah.
Because the marketplace needs the design. It needs to have a well thought out piece of property that is going to be the right thing for the industry, right thing for the marketplace, right thing for humanity. Spend time there, build that. Because once you've got that in place and you have a properly laid out plan, then the funding is always ready for that. It always takes well over a year just to get through those stages. Then it takes a year to build. Then it takes another year to understand the process. So the invested time is about 3 years, and you have to really step people back from that and get them to understand. So the do's are definitely to spend time on the design side, really work that through, engage when it's the right time to engage, and don't just say, I want to be up and running in 3 or 4 months. I have $5 million and let's get going. Right? That's the don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fearful answer to what's your timeline? 3 months.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have the design done.
That's right.
It'll be a year after that.
Correct.
So a little bit further down the life cycle of like the do's and the don'ts. So let's assume that somebody does have their product in line, and actually to go right back to that real quick, 2 years ago, I would say digitize your product, because a lot of times we're getting hand drawings. So again, going down to somebody who knows their product, they don't actually have a digital design. I can't run automation. We can't run automation without something in a computer. So we're past that point, which is good. I think that design is advancing quite quickly. I think it's in construction and offsite construction. The amount of BIM software companies automated, I say automation at this conference, like, oh, I'm in design too. I was like, no, we're robotics. The understanding of that, I think, is very encouraging. I think that the next step is now the production systems, because this design is now going to support that. The note that I made here is understand your product. Have it so that when we do, and actually one of the first steps that we undertake with a potential client is we take them through what we call a questionnaire. And a lot of times when we ask these questions, like, what's your production rate? What kind of variance do you have in the product? What do you want to go to? If you can make more, can you sell more? And they start to answer these questions, and it's the first time they actually sat down and take a look at it. Sometimes it's even to the point that, I'll go through an ROI analysis, and we do that as a baseline with machines that we sell. We make business cases for the machines that we sell. A lot of times people go out, and I guess this is now I'm jumping into another don't just go out and buy a piece of machinery off the shelf and then try to have to sacrifice your design, sacrifice what's happening downstream, and you're not going to realize the payback that you should have. And you're probably not doing an ROI analysis anyways to start. I'll go back to my original point in that I'll regurgitate some of these numbers to these people as we go through an ROI analysis and be like, okay, well, it says here you guys are making 5 modules per day, so that means this many per year. Like, well, no, we don't make that many per year. Like, well, if you do 5 per day, that's how much you do per year. Make sure that you have an understanding of that so that you can make the business case to, these are significant capital investments. And it's not just that initial outlay that we say that they have that big problem with. It's now a different way of life too. If you're bringing automation and robotics into your facility for the first time, you're now going to be hiring a robot tech, a PLC technician. You're changing the way you do things in your factory. And you need to have that, we talked about before, your QA, you have to have that in line. We had to explain to one customer what a process engineer was. Where to us, that's an afterthought.
I mean, to strengthen your point, we did this project in BC about two and a half years ago, and I really remember the conversation. Maybe 3 years ago when we first engaged, and they were looking to automate. That was the big conversation. And they were a well-known builder. They had been around for 20 years prior to engaging. Now they were ready to really do what they needed to do, and they wanted to focus in on automation. It was the most important part of the conversation. So we looked at everything we had to do. We started to lay out tables, started to lay out the processing, and we realized that in this particular scenario, that was probably best to future-proof their facility. In other words, design for engineering, design for automation.
Yeah.
Lay everything out. Let's add automation in the future when it's the right time.
Yeah.
So they chose to go down that path with us, other than somebody else who was going down the automation route,
Yeah.
right? And and it really it worked out well for them. But on the other side, they ended up buying a very, very sophisticated, off-the-shelf, complex cutting saw. And it's a beautiful saw. It can do many, many things. It fits right for their marketplace. But they didn't have the staff.
Right.
So now the person who's running that is a German fellow who's the plant manager, who's the only one who can understand how to run the machine. And now you have the most costly individual who should really be future proofing the production process is stuck running a machine.
Yeah.
Right? So the company is definitely moving forward because they have the work, they have talented people, but you're now starting to misplace the staffing levels because they can't find the right person to run this machine, which was a lot more than even our pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
And to this day, they haven't had to automate the process line because it's actually meeting their needs, if not exceeding them. But we're ready to go when automation's ready to go. So you have to really pull this stuff back and say, okay, where are you going? Why are you going to go that direction? What is your mindset? What are your staffing levels? There's depth.
Yeah.
But the success is there. You can build towards the success, and they're a stronger company because of it. So.
Yeah, and that's so. Again, we talked about this, you and I, in a conversation before, but we talk about we spend a lot more time now in consultative role because these people are taking on their first piece of automation. We call it stages of automation. So we actually do a gap analysis to see where the potential customer sits now, where they want to go, and then propose a roadmap to that. So it's not necessarily, sometimes they want to take that big leap and you have time. Sometimes it could take upwards of 2 years to build the automation. So we can make sure that facility is ready for that. A lot of times when you propose that big price tag and say it's going to take 2 years, or let's walk before you run. Let's put some smart fixtures in your facility. It's going to take 9 months. We'll make sure that you have the staff there. Our HR team actually works with our potential customers to hire, because a lot of times they're hiring a lot of people similar to what we hire. We help them bring those people on board so that it's more, we call it responsible automation. So that what we want to ensure is that it's not a one and done. It's you're choosing an automation partner to change, again, to use the phrase, to change the way that you do things, to bring it to Industry 4.0.
Well, I can assure you that there are people out there who don't have the ethics that you to.
Oh yeah, and that's what we know who they are. That's why I say don't buy something off the shelf because it's one and done.
Yeah, I speak from experience.
But I can't fix those machines too. Or we can't. I say I a lot. I have to stop that because I'm just a business grad. I don't know anything.
We have a few minutes left. If you agree, we'll open it up to any questions. Sure. Yes.
Yeah, just sort of a question about, I guess, the type of companies you encounter and that are ready or not ready for this, and maybe your thoughts on, a lot of the offsite automation stuff last year is kind of roiled by like Katera kind of not really finding its business case and kind of running out of runway there. Any thoughts on like people who wanted to thought, oh, vertical integration, start to finish is the way to automate it, versus sort of like bringing a consultant or just having one component of the project team getting into automation? Like, is that the way forward? Should just be one person dictating everything, like, or should it be just finding the right partners who get it?
I'll jump in on this one.
You can,
Because I've
I'll probably add to it.
now in the last, let's say 6-7 years, we've seen a wide spectrum of people looking at the marketplace in a different way. There is not one direct approach that would be, let's say, would gain you that success that quickly. So it's not just one way to do things. There's the large mega factories such as the Katera, such as Autovol, these sort of companies. That's their concept, to go large, to go high output. That has its own complexities, that has large capital outlay. There's other ways too. In these conferences, I've met individuals who are coming from the tech industry and looking at what they call the Starbucks approach, right? So in a city like New York, could they have 3 smaller high frequency facilities? And those high frequency facilities would be more nimble and more adaptable to market change and market opportunities, right? But for us, it's very exciting either way. We can build table systems and wing systems and storage lines that can meet either one of those demands. But having an open mind, how you approach it based on your marketplace and what is coming at you and what you need to both in the short term and the long term, really getting down deep into the conversation of where you want to go in the marketplace, is a wiser approach, in our opinion. Because as a machine producers, we can produce anything.
Yeah.
Right? You throw something at us and you give us the opportunity, we'll design it. We'll come up with the flow. We'll meet the needs that you need to do. We'll add automation where it's required, and we'll give you as much opportunity to be successful as possible. But you have to look at your own marketplace. And therefore, if you can create the right business model, the capital is there to help you. Okay, the marketplace is definitely, the demand is there to fulfill that. The staffing and the HR component is a challenge and will be. And like we've talked on earlier, the design component and those elements are the earlier challenges, but I agree with you now that they're moving forward. So there's not really one direct way of doing it. You just have to look at what is the right one that fits with inside your marketplace. I do personally like this high frequency concept. The capital outlay is less. The repeatability for machine producers is interesting. We can gain some new dynamics where we can maybe start to standardize in certain areas that may be able to facilitate opportunities to be able to have a repeatable product. That's kind of fascinating for the marketplace, therefore allowing us also to be more adaptable to changes in the marketplace and not get you stuck with one way of doing things, right? So there's not just one way. There's not a silver bullet that's going to give you the success. And I think the fear that we have is when somebody comes in and just wants to throw a lot of money at it, which was the problem, one of the problems with Katera. There's many challenges with the Katera product. But the good thing about the Katera thing, just so everybody is aware, that it really taught a lot of us how to properly work with inside the marketplace, including the people who've moved on from Katera and stayed in the industry and grew it. They learned from their mistakes. And I think that's very helpful for the industry, right? So, but just having a big pile of money and saying, okay, I'm just going to build this mega factory and kind of watch out.
Just wing it, yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Always more money.
Yeah, if you really do the analysis on the Katera factory, especially the Tracy factory, the imbalance on all the different production lines that they had was less than. I think they didn't have a balance that was greater than 10%. Yet they had 5 or 6 lines that were producing. So that means that there's 90% that's not producing, right? But they say, well, we only can get 10% of here, but there's 90% that's not. Complete imbalance. A kitchen line that makes 800 kitchens a day, but they're pushing out 4 or 5 modules a day. So they only need 4 or 5 kitchens. Why they have a production line that produces 800, right? There's this lack of really going deep into why you're building, what you're building, what you're going to do short and long terms.
And you and I talked about it this morning, the lack of strategy in that too. Because every one of those machines goes by a different manufacturer. This goes back to the automotive idea. have a standard, have a strategy to it. We talk about that all the time with these guys that are starting up, larger automated facilities. Where it's like, guys, let's set a machine build standard so that when your maintenance guy comes, when you hire a maintenance guy, he knows ABB robots, and that's the guy that's going to serve ABB robots. Katera had 7 different manufacturers of their machines in their facility. That's in automotive, you'd have to have typically, and you're going to have 3 or 4 different guys that have to service those machines because not everyone knows everything. But those are the strategies that were just simply overlooked. They just
Someone
kept
might take
buying
that big
machines.
swing just to make all the mistakes.
And that's the wonderful part of it, actually.
Yeah.
That's really
Lessons are free.
that's great. But I remember the Katera stories when we first did the original installation in Arizona, and we were trying to understand because we were just doing one part of the component, right? So we were doing wing systems and storage lines. So we would say to them, "Hey, can we get some good details and some CAD systems coming off of the lines prior to ours, just on height levels, what your flow is, what's the flow in front of us, what do you want it behind it?" And they would say no. Yeah. You concentrate on this part. This is the part you concentrate on. We don't want you to see the rest of the other part. I said, well, how do we know if this is going to work with it? It'll work with that. And then when it came to installation, they wanted to do their own installation. We sent our own teams there under our own expense because we wanted the installation to be correct, right? But they didn't want to. They know our guys can do it, but their guys never had installed machines before. And when we got there, their guys were like, we don't even know how to put these things together. What are we doing, right? So there's a lot of really great lessons to be learned from that. Sorry to be so long-winded, and sorry to rag on Katera because it actually did benefit the industry a great deal.
At least did, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like our session should be over. So thanks very much. Thanks to my colleagues. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.